Hi, welcome to another session of our show, ongoing series on security. So for this session, we're going to go into Azure Key Vault. So I have my colleague here, Emmanuel there. Emmanuel, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, so are you excited to go through this session?
Yeah, I'm very excited.
All right, so I'm not sure whether you know a lot about Key Vault, but do you have a slight idea of what this Azure Key Vault is about?
The keyboard helps you to store credentials secretly, and
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
you store it, you use it to access applications.
That's
It
exactly
helps
what
to
it
keep your
does.
credentials safe, so
Yeah,
that bad actors can't access it.
that's wonderful. You're
Mm.
spot on. So we're going to start the session. So let's begin. So introductions to Azure Key Vault. So as my colleagues get rightly said, so Azure Key Vault is more like a storage center, but instead of storing something locally on your system, this is more like a centrally managed storage system provided by Um, Microsoft. So essentially, this is one of the managed services provided by Microsoft. So you don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure, like update, patching, or whatever you. Everything is managed by Microsoft. So you simply use the service to store your sensitive information, such as API keys, password, connection string, and whatever you. So everything you put in there will be secure. It will be encrypted for you as well. So now let's look at the different types that we have. So when it comes to Key Vault, there is a standard tier and also a premium tier. With a standard tier, it's very cost effective, but the thing is that it doesn't come with what we call the hardware secure model. That means you can have these sort of like a hardware that have the barcode. So it should be backed by these hardware key where it can essentially give you extra protection compared to the standard way of storing your keys. But equally, Microsoft do a very good job of securing your keys anyway. So whether you're using a standard or premium, you're rest assured that these are were stored. Just that when you're using standard, you are essentially storing your keys in more like um, services that will have other organizations' keys and other stuff as well. But the premium one more likely have a more dedicated way of doing the storage. All right. So these are some of the key features. So we have the secret manager. So secret manager, like your tokens, your password, your API keys, all these can be stored in the Azure Key Vault. You also have your key management. So you can actually create and manage encrypted keys for storage using this use process. Certifications as well. So if you have a public and private SSL certificate, you can also store all of them inside a key vault. All right, so these are the types of the key that are managed. So it's similar to what we just ran through here. It can store secret keys and certificate essentially. And with all of these, one of the key elements is that once they are stored in there, that means your application can actually securely access these keys without reviewing the secret. So that means it's not leaving yourself to be exposed, especially leaving the password to be exposed. When you create an application, most people probably might just say, okay, let me just add the keys inside the application so that if, let's say, you want to reference a specific API endpoint, you stay within to the application, which is not a very secure way of doing it, right? So by leveraging a managed key solution like this, then means you are really protecting yourself against bad actor looking through your code to identify any embedded secrets. Now, how do you access these secrets? So when you create the Azure Key Vault, you can define how to access it. We can use a role-based access control. and set up the permissions on who can access this information. You can also leverage the Entra ID for authentication in terms of having access to the keys. The other thing you can also do as well is that you can actually enable logging and auditing. So whoever accesses your key, they'll leave an audit trail. So that means you can then see when and how they actually access your key, which is very, very helpful so that each time someone uses a key, you can track it. And then if it's from anyone in your team that shouldn't have access to it, they can make the right policies to ensure that it doesn't happen again. There's also another option for soft delete and also purge protection. And you can also limit it to a specific network. So for example, you can define a group of IP addresses that you want them to have access to the key vault, and you can also set it to a private endpoint so that only people in your organization within a specific network or subnet can actually have access to the key vault if you choose to as well. The peg protection is all about ensuring that whenever you store the keys, you can set up a retention time frame, and you use the peg protection to ensure that no key are deleted within that retention time frame. For example, if you set it for a retention time frame of, let's say, 90 days, the keys are going to be kept in that vault, and if anyone attempts to delete the key, it's not going to work, right? Unless the time frame have actually been expired, and that's when you'll be able to delete the key. This is all about making sure that your keys are well protected within the time frame of utilizing the key. And also, let's say a malicious actor managed to get a whole hands hold of it and they try to delete it, it's not going to allow them to delete it as well. So these are some of the common use cases. So with this key pair, you can use it for encryption of your data disk. You can also use it for your database encryption as well. And like I said earlier, you can also use it for web app certificates. So that means all your public and private keys certificate that can be installed in the key pair. And also enables zero trust security and compliance in cloud environment. Most organizations will conform to a specific standard like ISO or HIPAA or GDPR. With this key pair, so with this key vault, your organization will be in conform with those standards, because you have this much more secure way of storing your keys, and in terms of accessing of the keys to, they are much more clearly defined and more secure way. So right, now let's go into how you can implement Azure Key Vault. I'm just going to bring up my portal, my Azure portal. So to access the Key Vault, you simply type in Key Vault. This will take you to the Key Vault menu. And just like any application on Azure, you can simply click on Create. Once you click on Create, you can then define your subscription, create a resource group if you need to. So I'll name this one as Test Vault, RG for resource name. So as you can see here, Emmanuel, the creation of resources in Azure are always going to be the same. Just that each of them, once you come to the view, you can then define specific parameters, but the first part of this subscription and resources are always going to be the same across the board. Each services that you work with will have the option to always add a subscription and also a resource group, right? So once you define that, you then move on to the instant details, right? So with the instant details, this is where you give it a name. And let me hover on this one. So as you can see, the vault name must only contain alphanumeric and hash it cannot start and hash it. It cannot start with numbers. So you just conform with what it states in terms of the naming. So I can name this one as Test Vault, and it has to be unique. So as you can see, the name Test Vault is already in use. So this one I have to make it unique. So I can make it, let's say 21 and something like this. So that's it. Then you select the region where you want this to be deployed to. So I'll leave it at East US, but if you want to choose a different region, then you can select it from here. So, and this is what I was telling you about in terms of the pricing. When I hover upon this, if you want to see more about the pricing, you can click on this to really navigate to the pricing. But in here, we have the standard and the premium. Like I said earlier, the premium is backed by the HMS keys, and the standard is just a normal standard way of deploying. And in terms of the recovery option, you have the stop delay protection. So the stop delay protection, this will allow you to be able to set up the purge protection if you need to. So as you can see here, once enabled, I can then enable, let's say, enable purge protection, enforce a mandatory retention period for deletion vault and vault object. But I'll set this one to disable.
So what about days to retain deleted vaults? 90.
Yeah, so that will be the retention time frame. So that means
but you have disabled it.
You say?
You disabled it.
Yeah, so with this disabled, that means I can actually delete the anything in the keys within that time frame. See here, disable page protection, allow key and object to be paged during the retention time frame. So that means within that time frame of 90 days where I'm going to keep the key, right? I can essentially delete it if I don't want it. But for a production environment, it's always advisable to go with this option. So that means no one can delete the keys within this time frame of the 90 days. But obviously, this is just a test environment, so I'm just going to disable it. All right, so now let's look at the access configuration. So in terms of just accessing your key vault, you can define how to access it. So you can use a role-based access control where you can define the specific roles that can gain access to this key vault. You can also use the vault access policy, all right, for that. So this would be more like specific policies or security principles or users or groups that you want them to access the key. So you can define it by selecting that. The resource access is where it's more like you defining a firewall to allow where the connection can actually come from. So, sorry, the resource access, this is all about what can use the key, right? So you can essentially say, okay, Azure virtual machines for deployment can use this key. So essentially, once I created, you can put in keys that the virtual machine can leverage for deployment. Or let's say resource manager template, they can also leverage the key as well. Or if you want to use it for Azure disk encryption, you can also enable that option. I would select all the three. All right. So once I select the key vault here, so if I remove this, you notice that I don't see my name at the bottom. But once I remove it, you can see that now I see the user that can actually use the key. And with a user, it will give you specific key permissions. So get, list, update, create, import. So that's exactly what this user can actually do in terms of when they gain access to the key, secret, and also certificate. These are the CRUD. That means what are the actions that the user can actually do once they are defined here. All right, so I'll select my name and then I'll click on next. And in here, you can define whether you want this to be publicly accessible. So as you can see, if I disable the public accessible, then I get option to create a private endpoint. So a private endpoint, you will define it in a way that it's only going to be subnet that you have access to internally, so that you can then link your key vault to those specific subnet as a private endpoint. I'll leave this one as public. When you leave it as public, you can also either say all network, that means anyone in the internet can actually access your key vault because it's publicly accessible. Or you can define a specific range of IP addresses that can access to this. So that means if I do a select network, I can come down here and then define what are the networks that should have access to this key vault. But as a test, I'll just leave it as all network. But for a production environment, it's always advisable to ensure that you specify the scope of network that should be accessible, but preferably if this is going to be used privately, then don't make it public, just use the private endpoint. Okay, so once you define that, then you click on next, and as always, you can then define your tags. So tags, as you rightly said the other time, for billing and a way of just tracking the specific key vault usage. You can use a tag for that as well. So that's about it. Then we'll do the verification here just to make sure that all the entities you define are all correct. Once you get a green tick, then you're all good to go. So it's just still doing the verification. All right, so we are all good. I get a create button here. You can go through what have been defined just to make sure everything's all good. Once you're happy with it, then you simply click on create, and that will create your key vault. Right. So as you can see from there, the key vault has been created successfully. We can go straight to the resource by clicking on go to resource here, and that will take it to the key vault that we have created. So in terms of storing objects, this is where you store the keys, the secret, and the certificate. So if you have a specific secret that you want to store, you just come in here, you can generate or import keys. So if I click on here, and then decide what is the name of the key, then you can define the secret value, then you set the expiry date, the activation date, and then you save it. So once you save it, then your applications will be able to access this this secret using the key vault. So I'm just going to just put in a few information, test key. So you can tell you what the content type is. So you set up the activation key.
The secret value, what is that?
Which one?
The secret value.
So the secret value will be what exactly you are saving as a secret.
As you can see here, or something.
Yeah, so the Azure Portal currently only supports single secret value. Please use Azure Shell to have a multi-value. But this is really a secret that you're trying to save, or you're trying to ensure that no one have access to. So that means your applications that are going to leverage this, you're not going to embed that secret into the application. Rather, they're going to leverage the key vault to access this specific secret value. All right. So once you define it, you can also set up expiry date as well if you want to. So with this, I'll probably set an expiry date as just keep it as it is, and then you can then proceed to enable it. So you just click on create, and that's about it. So we have it created. Right, so that's it for how to create and manage secret. So if this video helped you out, make sure you hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.